Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're delighted to have you with us today for this very special event coming the day after the National Day of Morocco, for this international conference sponsored by Huawei Group in partnership with Forbes. We have today 5 amazing panelists. But before all of that, I would like you to give another round of applause for the amazing organization of the National Day yesterday. We all feel humbled, so proud. Let's give a homage to the whole team who got all of this together, and let's get this thing going. So we have today an amazing panel for this conference, but as you know, coronavirus is like when you have an argument with your best half. When you think it's over, there is always a new wave that is coming at you. So thanks to all of you for braving this wave of coronavirus, being with us today. And without further waiting, I will start this first panel, which is called How Morocco Has Preserved Its Balance and is Looking Towards the Future. I have with me today 5 amazing panelists regarded as icons when it comes to policymaking, banking, sustainability, entrepreneurship, and the head of the private sector of Morocco. So I guess this conversation is very important, and it's taking place in a very special place. Sadhguru said, without balance, you can't climb. The experience of Morocco over the last 2 years has shown that the kingdom not only shown resilience, but was able to project itself to the future. And these are the topics we're going to talk about: how you can balance between resilience, being able to fight the pandemic, and at the same time undergo some tremendous reforms, such as social protection for all Moroccans, the creation of the Mohamed VI Fund, the recovery plan, and all of these strategic things where our panelists will talk about today. So I'll start with you, Nadia Ftah. These are extraordinary times. For the last 2 years have been, to say the least, very challenging. You are this emblematic figure of the big transformational wave of women and talents coming from the private sector who joined the executive branch after His Majesty King Mohammed VI's speech in the fall of 2019, where he stated his strong will to see new faces endorse public responsibility. You joined the government in October 2019 as Minister of Tourism, Air Transports, Handicrafts and Social Economy, just before the pandemic. And you graduated this October to become Morocco's first woman to be Minister of Economy and Finance. And in the meantime, you were appointed as General Commissioner for the Moroccan Pavilion at Expo 2020. So just for that, I think you deserve a round of applause, because that's an amazing journey. Madam Minister, during this period, you imposed your figure as being like the advertising for Tag Heuer, don't crack under pressure. So before going into the technical questions, I want to ask you a question that a lot of people here maybe are asking themselves. How does it feel to enter government and to face 5 months later the biggest challenge humanity underwent for the last 300 years?
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so happy and honored to be present with you today in this panel, and I would like to thank our Master of Ceremony for all this wonderful organization of this panel. As you mentioned, it was not the plan, actually, the moment I was appointed Minister of Tourism, and actually I was sitting in a meeting with the industry of tourism, planning for a long future, the moment that I received the phone call telling me that the border were to close. So I have to keep the information for me for another hour. It was very difficult. But thanks to His Majesty the King, I think we entered quickly in a phase of serenity in managing this crisis. And I think the way he managed it was really impressive. And we should also pay tribute to all the Moroccan citizens, because I was personally impressed by the trust, the confidence, and the discipline in accepting all the great measures that have been taken to deal with this crisis. I think all of us were surprised that Moroccans were sitting in their small houses for 3 months with their families, waiting for medicine, for vaccines. We were all impressed also with the solidarity shown under the guidance of His Majesty of this fund that has been reaching $4 billion to help Moroccan citizens, to help companies.
It's the largest in Africa.
Yeah, yes, definitely the largest of Africa, and a big moment of solidarity. And also the fact that we've been ordering vaccine at very, very early stage, August 2020, much earlier, and today, having almost 70% of the population vaccinated is a major achievement of our country. We can compare to the most mature country, the richest country, and the richest of our country is the guidance of His Majesty and the discipline and the vision. And as you mentioned, we are more than blessed, because the moment we were managing and facing the most incredible crisis and headwinds ever, we were also organizing elections, democratic elections, in a very, very, I would say, modern way, because we had 3 elections in the same day, changing, I would say, all des élus, en fait, of Morocco. And we were planning for a future with the new development model. So we're blessed because the short term is being managed, and we have a plan for the midterm and the long term. And this is very important because we can then settle priorities, settle a roadmap, and go back to work. And this is very important. And the figures for 2021 shows that this resilience have been successful, because after a horrible year when the economy decreased by more than 6.3%, we are now recovering and getting almost 6% growth in 2021 and planning for 3.2% in 2022. So Moroccan is in motion, and I think in this crisis we definitely learned more. But we will get stronger, I would say, together to build a better future for the country.
So, Madam Minister, in substance, what you're saying is that in Morocco, we have a king with a vision, and we're a country with a roadmap. So we were able to combine those two times at the same time. Raza Jafar, let me turn to you. We're delighted to have you with us today. Not the man, but the legend. You're active in fields that are central for the conversation we're having today. And you have this global view on Morocco's journey towards emergence. But furthermore, your business ventures include banking, aviation, real estate, hospitality management, topics that are very dear to Morocco. You were able to convert this vision into reality. You created the Palazzo Versace in Dubai. You have the development of Emirates Financial Tower. You were featured in CNN. And before asking you the first question, I'd like to remember what the new development model of Morocco that was adopted in last May after a special commission have worked for 18 months in order to set the goals for 2035. The new development model says the ambition set forth by the new development model is one of a Morocco that is thriving and prosperous, skilled, inclusive and sustainable. The ambition also aspires to bold Morocco, willing and prepared to take on new challenges and opportunities and build leadership in new areas and sector. And of course, since in 2016, you have created the Global Sustainability Network. So you have all of those issues that are at core of what you're doing. My first question will be very simple. What's your take on this new development model that Morocco is launching?
First of all, thank you so much for having me here, and thanks for coming and taking the time out. I see many countries coming out with amazing models, and after reading through the Moroccan model, I believe, and I can clearly see the vision is clear. It's not very complicated. It's straightforward, and it's very achievable. The only thing that I continue to tell everybody is that a dream without a plan is just a wish. So I hope there is a very clear plan on execution of this model. So that's the part one that I looked at. The second thing is the whole world and the geniuses of the world got together for many years and launched the SDGs in 2015 September, which were 17 goals of sustainable development goals. If you read the goal number 8, there are many points in goal 8 which is also covered in SDGs, which is sustainable economic development, youth employment, inclusion, ending modern-day slavery, sustainable tourism. These are all the part of SDG 8. That's why GSN was started to just focus until 2030 on SDG 8. As we can see, the model for Morocco is based to achieve substantial results by 2035. Unemployment of the youth issue of 4.5 million is a very serious issue to look at. And I believe all of this is possible with sustainable economic development, and I think Morocco is poised to achieve it.
Thank you very much. We'll go back to you about this sustainable mix and how His Majesty showed leadership. We had COP22, the COP of action in Morocco, and now we have a very ambitious plan for the sustainability mix. Let me turn to you, Shakib Lalej, because you are the representative of the private sector. And I will do it in French, because Morocco is a very diverse country and we're open to all cultures and to all languages. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, you have arrived at the head of the President of the General Confederation of Moroccan Enterprises in 2020s. I cannot resist the temptation to tell you that if you had known what would have happened a few months later, would you have wanted to still present yourself as a president of all these companies, member of this confederation? Honestly, I was expecting this question, and if it was to do again, I would have done it again, without hesitation. I was elected end of January 2020. Back then, His Majesty the King had initiated the vision of a new model of development because the Moroccan economy was out of breath. And there was a problem of communication in between the private sector and the administration. In early January, here we go, we face a situation where we have to seize the economy. We had to maintain the economy, although it was put on hold. There was a royal vision where we created the COVID fund, and the OCVE was initiated. All these points helped us have important action plans on which we could rely on in order to take the necessary decisions for the future. Regarding the COVID fund, there was a voluntary and massive participation, whether it was from the population or even from the companies who contributed massively. And with the CVE, thanks to profound discussions with the administration and the then Minister of Finance, Madam the Minister, who was back then a Minister of Tourism, we discussed on the different measures to undertake. It was necessary to put a hold on the economy, but measures needed to be taken in order for life had to continue, and the companies had to survive, and decisions needed to be taken, especially social decisions, so that people could still receive money, their salaries, and the companies needed to survive at the stop of the economy. With the agricultural and feeding industry, it was necessary. The mindset of these companies, of these entrepreneurs, we had to reorganize the complete private sector to reorganize. You spoke of the COVID fund. You raised $4.5 million in 4 weeks, which was never seen, never heard of. Was it voluntary. This move of the Moroccan business, were they ready to fight the pandemic? Honestly, there was no hesitation from the Moroccan companies to contribute. The situation was unprecedented, and everyone mobilized and everyone spoke as one. We managed to find solutions immediately so that everyone could continue receiving the salaries and maintain a living. For those who were in the informal sector, we had to find the necessary means to survive as well. And thanks to the decisions taken by the CVE, they had to continue the payrolls. Regarding the country's economy and the debt recoveries, we had to postpone the payment plan. And we thought that it would only last 6 months, so we had put in place a refund payment plan of 6 months plus. No one expected it to last this long in order to recover. And we lost approximately $100 billion of GDP, and we re-injected the equivalent. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for all this information. We will come back to you because it is necessary for us to understand how the communication happened in between the private sector and the government and the public sector. In Morocco, for many years, a lot have said that governing is like the rain, and what the situation has demonstrated in these past 2 years is that the new paradigm is governing is to foresee.
We always ask bankers questions about numbers, EBITDA, performance, ratios, risk. But you are no ordinary banker. For more than a decade, you have been the face and the CEO of Crédit Agricole du Maroc, Morocco's largest bank when it comes to agriculture. So you have this unique position to tell us about this very specific sector, one of the most important sectors in Morocco. Having that in mind, I want to ask you almost a philosophical question. How do you see the evolution of the Moroccan society when it comes to the interaction between rural populations and urban population, knowing that this last period has broken all frontiers between the rural world and the urban world? Can we still say that in Morocco, one needs rain to rule, or is something much deeper happening in the Moroccan society?
Thank you very much, dear Abdelmalik. Thank you for your question. First of all, the theme of this forum is balance, and your question is all about balance. Because the vision of His Majesty about the rural areas is that we need to keep the balance between urban populations, urban areas, and rural areas. In Morocco, officially, there's 40% of the population which lives in rural areas. And in reality, I would say that it's upwards of 50%, because you have to take into account also the people who have left the rural areas but have not really come into the urban areas. They're living on the outskirts of cities. And so this 50% of the population which lives off the land, they are citizens, they are full-fledged citizens. And the society model that we need to thrive towards is not to go, as in more developed countries, towards a society where you have approximately 6% of rural population and 3% of farmer. In Morocco, we need to preserve this balance. And in order to preserve this balance, why do we need to preserve it? Because the job creation in urban areas is less than the demography of these urban areas. So if you don't want to increase poverty, if you don't want to increase the weight that the population, the exodus of population is putting on urban areas, you have to find ways to stabilize the populations in rural areas. And if you want to do that, you have to look to this population as, fully fledged citizens. They have all their rights. They have a right to good education, they have a right to good health services, they have a right to retirement advantages, and of course, they must not be stuck only in agriculture. It must be a completely sustainable society project. And this is what is exactly in the vision of His Majesty, and this is what comes in the new model of development. So the problem is, once you've said this, how do you go about doing it? You have to understand that there you have two pillars. One is the pillar of efficiency, which means that you have to be efficient in whatever you do. For example, if I'm talking about agriculture, you have to be efficient in the use of water with all the technologies that go with that. You have to be efficient in the use of agricultural tools and so forth and so forth. But that is not enough, because once you're very efficient, the need for labor diminishes. And you're stuck with the dilemma. You diminish the labor because productivity has increased. So what do you do with the rest of the population if you don't want them to go to the cities? So the idea is to create a sustainable society. And for that, there is the programs for youth entrepreneurship.
Which was launched by His Majesty on January
Exactly.
2020, just before the pandemic.
Exactly. And which has we are still working on it, and there's nothing stopped there. I mean, the pandemic has not stopped all these efforts that go into creating this middle class in rural areas. And you have to understand that it's a trickle-up effect, because
What's the trickle-up effect? I only know the trickle-down effect. What's
the trickle-down
trickle-up?
effect
You
is-
want to reverse the pyramid?
Exactly.
You want to do some stuff that only bankers understand?
No, it's very easy to understand. Usually people say, okay, it's going to be trickle down because we're going to have leaders and we're going to have champions, and they're going to, be the engine that drives the whole train and everything. But when you are talking about millions and millions of people, and you were talking about inclusion, you were talking about sustainability, you were talking about how you bring people together, this is done on the individual's basis. So you need all the individual energies in the rural area to come together. You need to give them the tools. For example, the digital economy is very important, because it's more important in rural areas where distances make it difficult to connect than in urban areas. We can go down the road and meet your banker. So what I call the trickle-up effect is something that is happening on individual level, and that combined creates a good dynamic to push society upwards.
Well, I have to say I'm jealous. I will ask my team to register the patent for trickle-up effect, and I can reuse it. You don't have the right to come into our grounds of economists and stuff. Please stay a banker. But this is an amazing...
Don't worry about that.
I think it's an amazing summary. In Morocco, we're not looking towards the trickle-down effect and to have only champions and bigs, but we want to do the trickle-up. So it's the heart, the mind, and the feet. This is the model that Morocco is trying to develop. I will come back to this with you, Tarek Sijilmassi, later, to see what are the challenges for to implement all of this. Thea Mirvold, we're so happy and grateful that you are with us today. We'd like to tell the audience that we reached out to her last Friday, and she was able to come and replace a panelist that was stuck in Mali because of the border close. So thank you very much for being with us today. We're very happy and humbled. You're one of the faces of the Expo, actually. So you were nominated as one of the 10 faces of the Expo. You are you're an education entrepreneur, technology founder, CEO of awarding-winning internationally recognized startups and brands. And we didn't want to make this first panel all about macroeconomics and stuff. We wanted to talk about the soft stuff, about education. You're an Expo 2020 global innovator. You're both Arabic and Norwegian. So your background resonates with Morocco, a country where we embrace diversity, cultural mix, and we are privileged to have you with us today. So as we said earlier in the scene setter by Madam Minister, Morocco was able to combine short responses to the pandemic and long-term reforms. Being a specialist of education and tech, what's in your opinion the winning bets that the kingdom has to engage in order to address future challenges?
First of all, merci. Thank you so much for having me here today, and happy National Day as well. I would like to say it's very inspiring to hear the different topics and the points that have been raised, trickle up and a few other points. But going back to the note that you were sharing about the vision of Morocco and the kingdom, it was very interesting to hear the word inclusion, and not diversity, but inclusion. I just want to speak to that point. Diversity is being invited to have a seat at the table, but inclusion is really about having a voice. And you're a testament to more than just having a voice. And I'm very proud to see that here today as well, and to really feel that. And I think going back to the softer skills, as you were mentioning, it's really about building that inclusive mindset. And how can we raise, and going back to entrepreneurship, how can we give access to entrepreneurship? How can we give access to technology? If the one thing that this pandemic has shown is really access to technology is truly key to furthering develop innovation and efficiency. I think we're all a little bit scared of this word of technology and what that can mean for all of our jobs, right? Technology is shifting every single job as we know it. But with technology and opportunity comes other opportunities that we haven't seen or perhaps even thought of as well. If we think about going back historically to the telephone operators, we were all scared when those jobs were lost, but look at how many new jobs were created. And I think it's also about having this positive mindset when it comes to technology and seeing the opportunities that are to come. So going back to the point of inclusion, you know, it's really about, if we want to create inclusive technology, we also need inclusive and diverse people creating these kinds of technology. And technology and innovation can come from anywhere to anyone at any time. And that's really the theme here at Expo as well, is, you know, connecting minds and creating the future. So going back to that, I think historically we think of technology coming from San Francisco, the US, and that model. But really, technology and innovation is problem solving. It's professional problem solving. Going back to your point on agriculture, there are different professional problems that we need to solve when it comes to technology and agriculture, and that can truly come from the people who are solving those problems. So I think, you know, the key points are really access to technology, inclusivity when it comes to building and fostering entrepreneurship, and going back to the points mentioned here today about the, you know, economic incentives around that too has been really inspiring to see. So I'm very optimistic and inspired to see what is to come out of Morocco as well.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we're privileged that our sixth panelist made it through coronavirus and traffic in Dubai, and he's here. So please welcome Yoro Mohamed Diallo, who just arrived. Thank you very much. And you are very privileged, sir, because you're in front of His Majesty's portrait, and this is something very important for us as Moroccans.
Thank you. It's a big honor for me.
Yoro Diallo, you are one of the most influential bankers of Africa, an advisor to several governments. You had a 40-year career in the financial sector. You worked on multi-billion deals on the continent. As you know, the World Bank recently described Morocco's action during the last 2 years as follows. Morocco stands out as a country that has seized the COVID-19 crisis as an opportunity to launch an ambitious program of transformative reforms. Adding, if successfully implemented, these reforms could lead to a stronger and more equitable growth path. So you have this helicopter view on what's happening in Morocco and in Africa, of course. What's your view on Morocco's journey so far?
Actually, thank you very much. Actually, I think Morocco has been always playing a leading role in Africa, basically, and I think it's a role model for most of the African countries. And when COVID-19 broke out, Morocco immediately took steps. Number one, to close borders, to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, and then, you know, once it's contained the spread of the disease, then
that's what we call principe de précaution maximum.
Exactly.
So in Morocco, if we can just give the figures to the audience,
yes,
we have around, which is very sad, 15 to 16,000 people who died of coronavirus for a 37 million population. But His Majesty's motto was, every life counts, so we will preserve the health of the Moroccans.
Absolutely. So that was a leading example for Africa. And then they went ahead also helping African countries by providing, vaccines and providing masks, providing gloves, providing, sanitary, how do you call it, all those precautionary things. So not only they contained the things, the disease, the consequences of the disease in Morocco, but they also help all the other African countries, mainly, like the Ivory Coast, Senegal, my own country, Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of Congo. We all benefited from the Moroccan experience in terms of containing COVID-19 and then going into resilient strategy to...
Just to give an idea of the 40 cargo planes that went from Casablanca to most of our African partner countries with masks, with hydroalcoholic gels, yes, with a lot of features that were made in Morocco, yes, because absolutely. Morocco has made a transformation and was able to create, thanks to its industry, all of these tools, yes, but it was sent. So it's what His Majesty called in the historic speech of Abidjan, Africa has to trust Africa first. Yes. That's the first leitmotif.
Africa to Africans first.
Africa to Africa.
That's His Majesty's motto. Okay.
Thank you. I will come back to you later on the African strategy that Morocco is trying to develop. So here we go again, Minister Ftah. In the words of the late, not poet, but race driver Mario Andretti, if you have the feeling that you control everything, it means that you are not going fast enough. As we said earlier, Morocco is a very stable nation, both on the institutional level and the macroeconomic level. Analysts often qualify Morocco as a country that is very much attached to a kind of orthodox macroeconomics. How do you reconcile this obligation to maintain balance and the ambition to finance the recovery plan, the transformation of the economy, social protection for all Moroccans, and the very social, ambitious policy that is in the agenda, on top of the agenda of the government? What are the challenges you are facing to stay balanced and at the same time be a nation on the move? And you're the lady dealing with money, so that's a key issue.
Definitely preparing for the budget for 2022 was a really complex equation to solve. First, there was no option to stop the dynamic and to compromise the, I would say, the recovery of the economy. So this choice was a priority, among other ones that you have recalled, like the generalization of social protection, because building for a great, inclusive, sustainable country, social and economic development starts with basic requirements. And we heard the message of the Moroccan citizens and the new development model, and the health protection was also a second priority. The third one was reinforcing the human capital and putting a lot of energy on education. So the government has to fund for all this and to finance all this major reform. And in the meanwhile, as we recall, we need also sustainable finance, because the burden of the debt has increased, as already everybody knows.
But it's still managed, right?
It is definitely managed, and we had to convince our partners that we were aware of the challenges, because at some stage, looking at this new model, without responding precisely for 15 years on how to finance it, we had to convince that choosing these priorities, recovery of the economy, social protection, and enhancing human capital is the proper things to do, because we are putting the fundamentals and investing in the futures. And I can tell you that the last mission of the IMF that happened like 3 weeks ago was a very important, I would say, due diligence process, because what we're telling them is that we have a cap, we have a roadmap, but as you mentioned, we have steps, priorities that have been set, and we will be managing the balance of financing all this and preserving the future of Morocco regarding its finance. So what is important, and this is what the government is committed to, is that once you choose the priority, you stick to the priority. You focus, and you are committed to execute the plan in a very disciplined but fast, I would say, motion. But I'm not forgetting an important, I would say, level on this development model is the reforms. This cannot happen without very important reforms that are ongoing. Reforms mainly on the public sector, because Morocco have been investing a lot in infrastructure, but not only. Will be investing a lot because we are having a major public investment this year, 245 billion dirhams.
So that's $3 billion. $3 billion.
Yeah, 30.
$30 billion. I'm sorry.
But what is important is that we are putting the first step, hoping for the private sector to do more efforts in the future.
So that was a clear message for you.
Yes, I was watching him to say that we have a deal. So Morocco, the government, the public sector are doing the major steps, but also doing the proper investment to prepare for Moroccans, for entrepreneurs, for the private sector, to be leading the future social and development of the country.
So you want free initiatives in the private sector. You want them to be more able to invest, to have a more sound environment, to be able to foster their initiatives. But let me ask you something. I read in the press those last 2 weeks that Morocco has opened his precautionary line from the IMF and from the World Bank. I think it's around $2 billion or something last year. But you didn't use it yet. So what's happening? You're not using this money right now? You don't need it?
Actually, it was 3 billion.
3 billion. Okay.
And we paid back 1 out of 3.
You paid back 1?
Yes, already. And we keep in two of them, but not using them. And one of the big efforts the Moroccan, I would say, public sector is doing is major saving in
imports.
In everything, actually. We've chosen to invest in education, in health, in major investment, but savings at, I would say, the administration and public sector are major. And we are not using this money. It is a precautionary line, as you mentioned. It is important during crisis because we had no visibility. And it helps you take in serenity all the major decisions that are being made today. And hopefully we are not using this 2 billion unless we have a major big investment project, but not for anything else.
So what you're saying, Madam Minister, is that you're going from a doctrine when state and government was expense-centered, and now it's human-centric. You want to see the objectives and put the human at the center of this new strategy by building human capital, by going forward with all of these issues. And that brings me to you again, Raza Jafar. There is an untold story because a lot of you have read the headlines about Morocco, this North African country that was able to factor 3 million masks per day, 3 weeks after the pandemic. But the untold story is the following. During COP22, His Majesty the King decided that we will pursue a zero plastic strategy. So all of the factories that were doing plastic bags had to change their machinery so they would have sustainable bags, because he wanted to get rid of all the plastic bags that are not recyclable in Morocco. And it is those factories who did the masks right after, because it's exactly the same fabric. So Morocco was agile enough to shift its industry and be able, in 3 weeks, whereas Europe was struggling to get masks everywhere, in 3 weeks Morocco was self-sufficient. In 6 weeks it was exporting masks. So that brings me to the elephant in the room. We are an emerging country. We haven't polluted a lot those last 40 years. And now regulations, global regulations are putting huge constraints in front of us in order to be compliant with the ecological transformation. How does sustainability fit in all this, Raza Jafar? Because you follow sustainability very closely.
It's a very good point that you raised. And to be very honest, I want to start with saying it's a shame at the way the developed world has acted over the last few years, especially when just in pandemic we have seen countries like US, UK, Europe have spent trillions of dollars just to fight pandemic, right? About 6 trillion in US, trillion pounds in UK, over a trillion in Europe. And then they have told the rest of the world, like countries like Morocco, that we are going to give you $100 billion to fix your entire sustainability problem and shift to the new energy and all these things that are a wish list after consuming more than their due share of the world, to go and try to have their contribution. And you know, the sad part was the COP26, these big name countries did not even deliver on that promise. So they ran short of that money. So that's a very
remind
good
us
point.
of the numbers: 6.5 trillions, 100 billion.
100 billion, including all the world, including US, Germany, Japan, you know,
Wow.
UK. All these big countries put together were supposed to put 100 billion to fix the global problem of environment. And they didn't deliver on that promise either. We have seen countries backing out of the commitment as well. So yes, I agree with you totally that it's an unfair world, but we need to just lift ourselves and agree to one thing, that this planet Earth is what we are living in. And it belongs to all of us, and we really don't have time to cry about he did, she did, who did what. We need to just get our act together, focus on what we can do, right? All we are answerable for is what we can do, and I believe what steps Morocco has taken. I think Rwanda also took that step some time ago. I went there to Rwanda and I was asked, wait a second, what's in your duty-free bag? You can't take this plastic bag, you can take whatever is inside. They don't use plastic bag. I was sitting there, they clean the city every month. So there are steps that are being taken, but sustainability is something that we also need to ensure that businesses, every single human being, and like your trickle-up economy, we need to make sure that awareness, encouragement, support, it has to come from all sides, from the country, as a government, from businesses and organization, and from population.
So you see, Shakib Lalaj, everybody is putting pressure on you. Minister of Finance said, I think she didn't want to use the words of the great American poet Janet Jackson, what have you done for me lately? But she's asking you, what will you do for me in the future and how will you move? Donc, Shakib Lalaj, durant cette période, on a vu une convergence.
Shakib Lalaj, pendant cette période, nous avons vu quelque chose d'exceptionnel au Maroc depuis l'indépendance. Ce travail entre le secteur privé, this work between private sector and public sector, we have seen a lot of research that has been done during the crisis. For example, a number of topics that allows businesses to go far. There's a question that everybody is asking: is this sacred union between the private and the public sector? Is this momentum between the two sectors will last? Will it last? We are blessed to have today representative of both sectors, but do you think that this will last for long? I'd say that the basis is here, and this is an honest commitment, and the administration and the private sector, the private and public sector were able to cooperate together to find solutions for this crisis. I'd say that the industries in Morocco showed agility, which gave us trust in ourselves and gave us a trust and confidence in the future. There's a lot of projects that were successful here lately in the Morocco, and we had more than 700 projects that were approved, which shows that we are on the right path to respond to the question of Minister. Now, we are 2/3 of investment in public sector as opposed versus 1/3 of investment in the private sector, and we need a shift in this investment. I think we have a lot of positive points, such as the free trade contracts and agreements that we made with a lot of countries, and also this open door towards Africa and Europe. And we had a lot of investments, important investments during the last year, as you know, Tangimed port, and also Nador port at Al Dakhla. All these infrastructures that were made also in the ways, all the electrification, also on many levels, we had investments, and of course there are few challenges. You have mentioned the new development model, and this model has given results. We estimated that it was the duty of the public sector to work on these outcomes. Also, everybody participated because we had the answers already. We knew what to do. I mentioned the decarbonization, for example. It's an important topic on which we try to, we know that we have an opportunity and hope for the Morocco to produce the energy in clean energy. This is something that we work on and we count on in order to have more competitiveness in our industry. We also have inconveniences when it comes to energy. So I need also the human capital, and I had the pleasure to visit Renault, Peugeot, and all the ecosystem of the automobile. 100% of the effective is human. Let's remind the audience, for those who don't know, that we are major exporters of automobile. We have the capacity. We are the first contributors to export of automobiles. Now we're working on this. We had weak integration. Now we are at 60% of integration. So the human capital, I visited, as mentioned, all the manufacturers. Those are human effect or human capital is 100% Moroccan. So this is a very important topic on which we need to work in order to make the human capital even more agile and respond to the economic development that I hope our country will have. You see, the subject of the human capital. In addition, there are a lot of topics that are on the table now, and we wanted to work on research and development. This is a very important topic on which we wanted to work. We want to develop industry. We cannot do so without R&D. So those are the main topics that we work on in order to have the public and private working together in the country. I have a small worry. Are you not more political in your answer? Because my question was about durability and how long do you think it will last, this cooperation between public and private sector? So this is a pertinent question. You mentioned a lot the effort by Morocco in infrastructure, 600 kilometers of highway. But how do you think things are going? What do you say to companies today? Do you say, fine, everything is going well with the government, we are in the same boat? Yes, we are in the same boat, and with the government we have now more collaboration, and so we are more optimistic. Now we need to deploy efforts to win and succeed in this mission. After a loss of 6% of the GDP, I am happy to say that now we are recovering. But to do so, we hope that we have the capacity to do so. This crisis showed us that this is possible. Do you think that this shift is possible in Morocco? Yes, it is. We just need to make the good decisions. I think we have the power to make things grow, to achieve this growth. The World Bank says that we need a growth rate of 6% to eradicate poverty. But I will want to ask a question about the social aspect. It's important for the public sector. Tarek?
Because you said this shimmering and amazing word, the triple up effect in rural areas, and to work on all ends of the social pyramid. But you've been in execution for the last 15 years. Practically, how do you do that? How can you push the top of the pyramid to look further in the future? And how can you support the bottom of the pyramid to become the next middle class that we need in Morocco?
Well, first of all, you have to be humble and realistic, because you have to understand that we all live at the junction between large numbers, large efforts, large projects, and the reality on the ground of the individual livelihood. So you have to be very careful. In Morocco is a very big country, large country. We have desert areas. We have pre-desert areas. We have areas that look like Western Europe, you know, in terms of the climate. We have mountainous areas. We have oasis areas, and so forth and so forth. So there is not one agriculture in Morocco. There is not one rural area in Morocco. There is a very big diversity of realities on the ground. So when I was talking about the junction between big projects, big numbers, and the reality on the ground of the family livelihood, you have to understand that, for example, Madam Minister is implementing some very important reforms and very big projects. For example, the social security reform and project that will cover 3 million people in rural areas, which is multiplied, this is
and 22 million
3 million families.
Until 2025.
When you say 3 million people, it's 3 million families, so it's about, I would say, 15 million people that will be covered. There is a program to transfer land ownership to 1 million young entrepreneur, 1 million hectares, sorry, to entrepreneurship, youth, young entrepreneurs. There is training programs for several 100,000 young entrepreneurs. There is a crop insurance plan that will be implemented in the future that will bring the areas that are insured from 1 million hectares to 2.5 million hectares. So these are big numbers, big projects. It has to match the reality on the ground. I'll give you an example which is better than a big discourse. For example, take a farmer who has 10 hectares and he's working wheat. His revenue, his yearly revenue, when everything is paid, is about 15,000 dirhams. So that's $1,500. So at that level, he's poor. If he wants to get up the social ladder, especially if he's in areas that are not made for wheat, because very often in Africa, and I've seen that because I've traveled in a lot of countries, you think that because it has been done for hundreds of years, it's the right thing to do. Not true. If you are growing wheat in an area that is not meant to grow wheat, you have to change. Not because your ancestors have done that, you have to change. So, for example, in our case, we are trying under the Morocco Green Plan to encourage people to transform themselves from wheat growers to olive tree growers. And so we give them the financing, the government gives them the subsidies, everything is put in motion so that it can be transformed. So this guy who has 10 hectares, he will eventually own 10 hectares of an olive tree plantation. And in that transformation, he will go from 15,000 dirhams per year to 80,000 dirhams per year, so $8,000. And when he goes to $8,000, so that's a revenue, a monthly revenue of about 7,000 dirhams per month. He has reached the middle class. He is in the middle class. So, but what happens in the meanwhile? An olive tree takes 3 years to grow if it's a specific kind, and 5 years to grow if it's the Moroccan kind. So what does he do during this 5 year or 3 to 5 years?
He calls you, I guess, because you're the banker.
I'm the banker. He calls me, but I'm not going to give him money for free for 5 years. So we need to implement some new systems where he will have some intermediary crops of different types that can grow between the trees. So it's a little bit technical, but it's very easy to do. And just to think that this guy, it's very simple to have a plan on paper. But the reality is that he has to sustain himself for 5 years, sustain his family for 5 years. So you have to plan on what is going to happen in this 5-year period. So this is why I'm saying sometimes you have very big projects, very big plans, and they don't work because somebody has forgotten that something very simple, very basic is happening on ground level. And if you want to succeed, you have to be at the same time macroeconomic and also have a very deep understanding of what's happening for the people at individual level.
So these are challenges of execution.
And humility. You have to be humble enough to go and ask the right questions.
Challenges of execution. You're Mohamed Diallo. You know that in the midst of the global financial crisis in 2008, His Majesty the King decided to double up on Africa, feeling that the European growth was not good enough and that Morocco needed to go back to its African roots. Since then, Morocco has become the second largest investor in Africa, the first in Greater Northwest Africa. Bearing in mind that Morocco has no fossil energy and that his growth in Africa was made through financial sector, services industry, how do you see the footprint of Morocco's economy in the continent, and how can Morocco move even faster to catalyze this dynamic?
Thank you. I think you're right. Morocco has been a leading investor, or basically a leading driver in basically all the sectors, all the development sectors in sub-Saharan Africa today. If you look at the banking sector, for instance, the Moroccan know-how in terms of banking basically covers basically all of West Africa. Definitely the leading banks like Attijari Wafa Bank, BMCE, and Bank of Africa and Atlantic Bank. So the banking industry really has been developed in Africa basically through Moroccan know-how and through Moroccan capacity or knowledge in the investment system. Also, in other sectors, Morocco has been very, very much in the driving front in terms of agriculture, giving us technical assistance, giving a lot of investment drives and joint investment processes to African countries that have less capacity to drive. And in sectors like transportation, like Air Morocco has been really technical assistant to many of the airlines. I'm thinking of Senegal, Air Senegal. We are assisted by Air Morocco and so forth and so on. So I'm saying the major player in terms of South-South partnership today is Morocco in sub-Saharan Africa, mainly in the Francophone Africa. I think there is a lot of drive that.
But Morocco has reached out to West Africa as well.
Basically, West Africa covered, including Ghana and Uganda and so forth and so on. But 100% of Francophone Africa is covered, and I think there is a lot of progress to be made in terms of in the non-French speaking Africa. But there is a lot of potential. I know even in Rwanda, the big investment process in the banking sector, and Equatorial Guinea and so forth and so on.
In Ethiopia, one of the biggest, largest projects when it comes to fertilizers, the gas pipeline with Nigeria. These are huge, big projects.
Huge, definitely. And and I think, and I'm very happy to note that Morocco now is a full member of how do you call it, the ECOWAS system, and I think so. It's a good thing for us because I'm saying, as non-Moroccan sub-Saharan Africans, because we look up in Morocco to lead and to partner, to develop, to help us in terms of technology and development, the human capital that His Excellency was talking about. It is very, very important, and this Morocco is helping us a lot. He's leading in all these things. Plus now, very, very strong financial investment drive. Initially, like Cote d'Ivoire now is being developed a lot in terms of ecological development processes, tourism, infrastructure. And so maybe Morocco should make a lot more efforts in terms of developing the tourism sector, for instance, where many of the African countries that have a good touristic potential could take Morocco's example to be able to develop further.
Just to give some figures, over the last 20 years, His Majesty has done more than 100 trips to Africa. He stays long. Sometimes he brings with him the business community because he wants Moroccan companies to move and invest in sub-Saharan Africa. And there are areas where Morocco is not expected. For instance, the Bay of Cocody in Ivory Coast is managed by a Moroccan company. It's a $500 million project. So there are positive externalities to this footprint in Africa.
Yes, it's very good. And they don't have this velleity. This is not a colonial velleity like many of the other do. We go on a more like equal basis. And the partnership really, I think, is a good one.
Yeah, I think that the difference in the Moroccan model is that a lot of sub-Saharan companies that were acquired by Moroccan companies kept the local leadership.
Exactly.
They didn't send Moroccans there in order to manage those companies. They kept the local leadership, they kept the local talents, and they tried to do this South-South partnership, and it is on top of priorities of Morocco right now. So before the wrap-up and ask all of you to give us your takeout for the next generation, I have the final question for you, Thea. I'm sorry because we always do this, like we always ask the usual suspect about the role of women and how do you see their role in this new development model. But I think it's very important because Madam Minister here is an emblematic example of how women are entering the leadership positions in the executive branch. But I'm sure we can do more. And we can have more women in the public sector, in the private sector. What's, in your opinion, the steps that we need to undertake in order to have more women in the public sphere and in the private sector?
I think I could talk about that all day. But to keep it short, I want to say the first thing is representation matters. We need to see women and diverse people speaking. And going back to the point on inclusion, I'm very honored and proud to sit here next to you today because really, I think we cannot take that for granted. It's important to mention that representation matters, not just for our generation, but for future generations. To see that, to aspire to that, I'm sure many young women here today in the audience are inspired to be here listening to you today. So I think that's, first of all, fundamentally very important. Second of all is really about inclusion and going back to inclusive society. How can we in the private sector become more inclusive as employers? How can we be conscious of our unconscious bias? There's a lot there that we are not potentially tapping into, and also culturally as well. So I think it's important to be aware of this unconscious bias that exists within the private sector, within work. Going back to tech and VC, just to mention some data points on unconscious bias, out of all of the billions and billions of dollars that get invested into startups and tech, how much money do you think gets invested into female-led startups?
I'm not good with numbers. I think I showed that during this panel.
Not 10%, not 5%, less than 2%. So unconscious bias is real. Just want to mention that. And there's a lot more that we can do globally. But I think regionally, the perception of women in work and in business and so on is very misunderstood at an international stage. And I think it's very important for this region, for the Middle East, to also change and shape that narrative as well. So I think that's very important. So going back to that, I think it's really important to, again, representation matters, inclusion matters. And just to take a statistics from the Norwegian government and the Norwegian population as well, we have one of the largest oil funds in Norway. But the contribution to women in society has had such a massive effect on our GDP that it's equal to our oil fund, going back to things like paternity measures and maternity and so on as well. So women in society does make a massive difference. So I'll end with that.
Thank you very much. I think it's a message for the ages to come and for the next generation. So I would like to wrap up by asking each and every one of you to give me your thoughts about what are your hopes for the next generation that is coming in Morocco. As you know, we have a lot of youth who are trying to enter the job market. So I'll ask each and every one of you, what are your message for the next generation, for your children if you have children, and what are your hopes for this amazing and very singular country? I'll start with you, Raza. And you have a lot of Moroccan friends, so that I think that comes handy, so you can say a few words about your expectations.
I would start with saying that technology, as Tia was also mentioning, is something the youth needs to take a lot of attention, pay a lot of attention to. So that's one thing. Technology, technology, technology. Do not get left behind. Number two, sustainability. And stop thinking only geographically as one world. But understand, you see, the whole sustainability comes into play in a person's mind when you think about humanity and not just a nationality. So think of humanity as one. The last message would be, Africa has suffered a lot from slavery for centuries.
Which is a question we don't have in Morocco. It's a question that is totally ended.
So if you just watch and look at the list of GSI, the Global Slavery Index, it ranks Morocco in there as well. Okay. So out of 159 countries that exist, and if there is any dispute on that number, there are contexts given where you can dispute that, right? Slavery is modern day slavery, and that is one thing that we need to look at and ensure we don't accept it. So these are the messages.
Okay. Tariq Sijilmasi, what's your message to your children and to the next generation when it comes to Morocco?
Well, my message to my children and the next generation would be, first of all, stay in Morocco. We need you. I mean, that's the most basic message. We've seen too often that talents are stolen abroad.
The brain drain.
The brain drain.
We will talk about it extensively in panel 2.
It is real. It is real. In my bank, we've lost 15 talents last year. You know, everybody's talking about stopping immigration and so forth, and how Europe wants to close down its borders. If they want to close down their borders, why don't they close it to our digital engineers that they're sending people to steal them away from us?
It's called the Euro-Disney paradox. If you're a doctor in Morocco and want a visa to go to Euro-Disney, it takes you 3 months. If you're an engineer, you get a 4-year visa card in 15 days.
And so we have to keep our strength, our talents at home. So that's what I would say, the first of all. And second, I would always advocate for rural areas and rural people, just to say that maybe 1 dirham spent there, and this goes for the public sectors and for the private sector. 1 dirham spent there is maybe 10 dirhams that you're saving in the future in terms of problems that you avoid, security, you know, and employment, job creation. So invest in rural areas. Those are my.
So you're the panelist with all the catchphrases. 1 dirham that it has been invested in rural areas. That's 10 dirham that has
in the
been
future that you don't have to spend on solving problems.
That's amazing. Thea?
I would say, again, to your point about you know, brain drain and maybe brain regain, is we need to create problems and really solve those problems for, but also from the region. We need to change the narrative of this region, and it's very inspiring to see how Morocco is doing that. So one theme that I would leave you with, going back to connecting minds and creating the future, was the theme here at Expo, is really how can we create and solve problems for, but from the region? Going back to your point as well.
Président Lalèche, quel est votre...
President Shakib, what would be your message for future generations? I go back to what my friend Tariq has said. We need to keep the youth in the country. They need to stay in the country. This is why we need to create jobs. We need to have a positive future. And this is the role that should be played by the administration, by both the public and private sector, to give the momentum. And we need to revise again the laws to allow the people working in the digital to be able to invest a young person who is launching a startup in Morocco does not have reference, does not have any laws to look up to in order to stay in the country and able to work correctly in the country. I would like to say also that the women, integrating women in our economy is a very important point, and I think that we are aware every day by day that the women have a lot to give to our economy and to our country.
To Her Excellency Minister Fattah, what's your message for the generations?
I'll say Morocco is really have all the basis to be a leader in, not only a global leader in the region that we all live in sub-Saharan Africa, but in the world. And basically, we have to capitalize on knowledge and education. And because, the reason why Indians are all into computers just because, every Indian from childhood on, you learn to do computers. So there is nothing devilish about it. We have to get our youth, and the youth have to be able to focus on education. Once they are educated, they will be the top leading giants, which they already are, but they could be on regionally and then have more like spread the influence not only sub-regionally but on a worldwide basis. You look at the Indian technology, the top GAFA companies are all run by Indians. Why not Moroccans? Why not Senegalese? Why not Africans? It's just knowledge right now. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. All we have to do is focus on education.
So your key message is why not us?
Why not us?
Why not us?
Good.
Can we do it? Madam Minister, what's your message to your children and the generations to come?
Okay, I wish that we all increase the awareness among the youth in our country, that we have a singular model, that we have a real leadership, and I'm asking all my colleague panelists for their testimony for this. So the challenge is that we release their energies, and for this we need to increase their self-esteem. I don't know how.
Self-esteem, yeah,
okay. So for this we need to provide for more education, but definitely tell them to love their country as much as we do all here in this country, because they're allowed to have a great ambition for this country. We have the talent to do it, but we need them to be strong, to be educated, and to be determined. So hopefully they will be carrying the same optimism for their country in the future as we all do, despite all what we have been living for the last 2 years.
So strong, optimistic, and determined. Ladies and gentlemen, the four main takeouts. There is one thing that never changes in this very old nation, which is Morocco. Morocco is like a Patek Philippe. You don't really own it. You're just the guardian for the next generations. So we are all here, I think, aligned behind His Majesty's vision and his leadership. And all Moroccans are really proud to be members of this country. But three things has changed. And this panel is emblematic of those changes. First, we see more women at the top jobs. The second thing, we have more people speaking English. And the third thing is that finally we manage to finish the panel exactly on time, which is a major change. So a round of applause to all of our panelists. Thank you very much. And start on time as well. So it was on. Ladies and gentlemen, I will, without no further notice, I will ask my distinguished panelists to switch with the next panelists of the next panel. And I'll invite the panelists of the next panel to come and join me for this second round. And my team will indicate the seating to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so happy to have all of you for this second panel. We spoke about the serious stuff, the macroeconomics, balance, and now we're going to talk about the even more serious stuff, which is Morocco's means, and the soft skills, and digital, and ecological transition, and all of these topics that are at the heart of the conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, in 1994, one company an automaker, General Motors, had a market capitalization of $130 billion and was employing 250,000 employees. As we speak right now, one technological company, Apple, has a market capitalization of $1 trillion and has 10,000 employees on its payroll. In 30 years, technology has destroyed blue-collar jobs, white-collar jobs, and Morocco, like a lot of countries, is facing the immense challenge of the fourth industrial revolution, combined with the climate emergency, and it has changed the way we consume, we produce, we train, we exchange, and inform ourselves. In this context, we have new topics in Morocco. At the center of gravity of our nation's strength, and we have to consecrate the preeminence of soft skills as well as technological knowledge. How is Morocco dealing with these profound changes in terms of agriculture, finance, digital, culture, and at the same time reaffirming its African roots? How does the kingdom embrace these shifts for the youth, its education, the training of its talents? How does the geoeconomy and the diversification of alliances impact the new status of Morocco as a new regional powerhouse? To answer all of these questions, I have the great honor to have 6 key witnesses that will share their analysis of the Moroccan trajectory and how it's moving forward with the new challenges of humanity. Saïd El Hadi, you will be my first witness. When one says your name in Morocco, something comes up to mind immediately, which is Tangemed, the largest African port, something that was born out of a vision. And I would like to share with you this anecdote. In 2004, a big American consulting firm, McKinsey, was doing the business plan for Tangemed. And they gave to His Majesty the business plan and they said, Your Majesty, this port will not make money until 20 years from now. And the answer of His Majesty the King Mohammed VI, that's good. We have to start right now. But Tangemed was profitable after 6 or 7 years. It became this amazing journey of physical infrastructures. So I was saying, Saïd El Hadi, your name is strongly associated with Tangemed, the emblematic journey of the port. But people know you less as the CEO of Nareva, one of the national private champions of green energy. So, Saïd El Hadi, I want to ask you this question. In short, you spent a large part of your career building infrastructures and physical infrastructures, and now you're spending the rest of your career trying to make these infrastructures consume less energy. And as you all know, Morocco, under the leadership of His Majesty the King, ambitions to become the green energy hub of the region. So my first question is going to be very simple. In your informed opinion, do you believe that today we have a momentum that all stakeholders are aligned to meet this new challenge?
Thank you, Sir Abdelmalek. So first, I do confirm that I was part of the journey back in the years 2000, so the journey of the Tangemed. Proud of having done that at that time. As you mentioned, maybe this is in connection with your question about energy. Yes, it was with a very much forward-looking vision of His Majesty at that time, launching this Tangemed project. It's not only a port project; it's also an industrial and logistical cluster project. Very much forward-looking, long-term oriented, and we are now sitting just near the zone of the port of Jebel Ali in Dubai. And I must say that that time, as part of the teams that we were working on Tangemed, we were very much impressed by Jebel Ali port and free zones performances and success, and very much inspired by that. And I must say that my successors and all the teams that worked on the project did a wonderful job, because as you said, yes, the project is making money, but most importantly, it is creating economic value and creating jobs. Tangier Med, the port of Tangier Med turned out to be now, since 2020, the #1 container port in the Mediterranean. This is very, very important and still ramping up. It is the #1 port in Africa. And the automotive industry cluster in the hinterland of the port is now one of the largest in the Mediterranean and clearly one of the most competitive in the world. And the exports of this automotive cluster account now for nearly 30% of Moroccan exports. This is just to show that, clairvoyant visions and good implementation are things that Morocco can do. This success was based on attributes of Morocco that are geographical location between Mediterranean, Atlantic, Europe, and Africa, and also the human capital. Now, Morocco is blessed also with another attribute, which is very important. We are blessed with one of the best renewable energy resources in the world, namely wind and solar. We have exceptional resources. We account among the top 10 countries in the world in terms of power of these resources.
And Morocco invested early. I mean, the solar project was launched in 2000.
Again, we had a very anticipative vision back in 2009 to say we have to work on renewables. That was His Majesty's vision to say. I mean, that was again forward-looking, and before that, I mean, now it's obvious for all that we have to. Wind and solar are the most appropriate choices, but at that time it was not clear. For the time being, now we have a real ecosystem in renewables. We have developers, we have national and international developers, we have bankers that know how to finance renewable projects, we have laws and regulations, we have PPPs in place, we have specific business models that are private to private, between private developers of renewable projects and private industrial companies that consume electricity, which is quite, I mean, again, something that was in anticipation, but what's happening now in the world. We call that corporate PPAs, corporate power purchase agreements. So we have a setup that is in place. We have already 40% of our power capacity mix is renewables, which is a very good performance, but it's still the beginning. So to answer your question, yes, we are ready. And above all, we have also industrial production that we know how to build wind turbine towers in Morocco. There are companies doing that in Morocco. We have
Gamesa, I think,
wind
in
blades
the north of Morocco.
Exactly, and we have also wind blades that are produced in Morocco and exported throughout the world. So we have a real ecosystem that have now developed and ready to transform again Morocco in a hub for green energy. We are prepared to that. That's what we.
So that's amazing. You do the transitions for me, because that's the journey of a transformation. And to talk about transformation, I'd like to turn to you, Nza Hayat. Usually, when we ask heads of a regulatory body to tell us about market regulations, governance, communication to the public, tracking companies, authorizing merger, you're this lady who receives very angry emails from lawyers, from a lot of companies who are trying to outfox the system and the regulations. But the key word here is transformation. So you're a former banker, but you were appointed a few years ago as head of the Market Regulation Authority of Morocco, IMMC. So we chose to have you in this panel because this transformation journey is very important. Why don't you first tell us about the reforms you underwent with your stewardship and how they prepare for the future?
Well, thank you, Abdul Malik. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As a transition, I was just mentioning to that before this conference, that in order to explain to this new team our transformation process, and I will talk about it later on, I organized a conference inviting the managers of Tanger Med, because I wanted the team and
to have a benchmark,
and to understand that everything is possible. Why? I mean, when I was appointed in 2016 by His Majesty, I was appointed to a newly transformed institution coming from the Securities Commission that was created during the first reform of capital markets in early 90s, to a new institution with more independence. That was the choice of Morocco, to have a financial system supervised by 3 independent bodies, regulators. Of course, you have central bank was already totally independent, and 2 authorities were created: the authorities to control insurance and social security, and the capital markets authority to supervise the capital markets. So my mission was to implement this transformation, that the governance was settled in line with the best international standards. We have a dual bodies, a board of directors that I chair, and we have a commission, enforcement committee. So so I had to implement this transformation, but at the same time, I asked myself, as you mentioned, Abdelmalik, I was coming from the private sector and the banking sector, and I had enough time to think that maybe we needed a leadership to develop the capital markets. So when I took my position, I said, well, let's go further, which was not, we wanted to focus equally on market watch, which is because we have to ensure protection for investors, we have to ensure good functioning of the markets, but at the same time, I asked myself, why isn't capital markets enough to finance economy? Less than 10% of our investment were financed through capital markets. So by that time, and it's important that I insist on, because we today are happy to have had this common vision of the Capital Markets Authority, because it will help for to be part of the relaunch post-COVID. So among the reforms, you have Casablanca Stock Exchange that we opened to SMEs with the creation of an alternative market. Also, we were wondering how to attract infrastructure projects to be financed through market. And so we created this compartment only for qualified investors, and we hope to we have to be able to finance new projects out of it. Also, new class of assets have been made possible, implemented through reforms like REITs. They have two years that have been implemented since 2019, and we already have up to 10 funds that are already managed. We finance Islamic finance and sukuks. So this class of assets were thought to finance and to offer financing to all kinds of projects. We are about to implement, because the legislation was approved, and we are about to have all the regulation settled for crowdfunding, and that will help the next, our startups to get finance and to.
So you are looking at those new challenges, financing startups, looking at, maybe we'll talk about green later on for your second question, but the first step was to transform the institution and now to open up to all the kinds of future challenges.
At the same time.
At the same time.
At the same time.
At the same time.
Yes,
Okay.
we've had many to go, and also to transform the mindset of the regulator. We're not only watchdog. We have to be very close to the stock exchange, to all stakeholders, issuers, stockbroker companies, asset manager, private investment bankers. So it's at the same time, at least we started all this reform at the same time.
Thank you very much, Nazan. I think you've been as well a tremendous panelist because you give me the ideal transition to look at Philippe Wang. Philippe Wang, vous êtes le vice-président.
You are the vice president executive for the Huawei Group in Northern Africa. You are the support of this conference because it would have never seen the light of day without your generous contribution. When you have received the call asking you to support the meeting on Morocco's transformation, you have answered yes very quickly. Your group, Huawei, it is a global network in terms of technology, but you are at the heart of a massive conversation, especially when it comes to Moroccan economy. You are within the digital transformation, ecological transformation, environmental, but also in entrepreneurship and supporting youth. My first question is quite simple. How do you see this triple challenge for you, this Huawei Group in Morocco since 20 years that have invested over $1 billion in Morocco this past few years? How do you see this triple transformation? First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It is quite an honor to be such a partner. And the reason why I gave my approval in less than 2 minutes are for several reasons. This kingdom has a high potential with a clear vision. His Majesty is a real visionary. And speaking of these three topics, digitalization, ecological transformation, and training is important. And all of them are under one umbrella, which is the digital economy. It is a very efficient tool, especially post-COVID, because we need to recover the economy and we need to rebalance our social platform. And Huawei is a very important player in that sector. It is a major opportunity for everyone to understand the needs of all our partners and to share our all vision, for it to be mapped at a strategic level, and then we would slowly go to the execution level. Oh, so it's not just this company that is developing the infrastructure and developing that. You are much more than that. Of course, that is only the result. But before building the network, we need to know what we are building and why we are building it. I think that Morocco has a very clear answer, especially when it comes to the new developing models. It is a clear vision for the future of the country and its people. And they know how the kingdom will win the fourth revolution, industrial revolution battle. I would like to give you an outsider's point of view, how we, outside Morocco, see this plan. First of all, we say that we're going to digitalize different services, public and private. But that's only a small part of the actual plan. Of the iceberg, if you prefer. In order to execute this plan, there are a lot of activities that are prepared. And this vision is very aligned with our own strategy, because before digitalizing a service, you need to have a platform, a cloud platform, and that is already indicated in the report. And they have also insisted on the importance of having a very large broadband and not to consume too much energy. And that was already part of the report too. But how to reach that? We need to train talent. And since 5 years in Huawei, we have already invested in Morocco to train the young talents. If I may just stop you there, how many people have you trained in Morocco? Well, that's part of the plan, is free access We have signed 54 MOUs with universities in Morocco, and it is a free training. Already, 4,800 students are freely trained because it's a long-term investment. So you're not seeing an ROI today, but you will see it soon, in a very near future. And finally, on the legal aspect, it is also very important to see it because the digital economy is quite new. I'm going to give you some numbers. It is the Chinese GDP is 38.6% is a digital economy contribution. In the US, it corresponds to over 54%. In Morocco, I think we still have a lot to do together, and I really see it important. Well, basically, you have put in place the principles of the great Mao leader. The head has to work with the legs. One cannot function without the other. Exactly, you have said it. It's the tradition of ambition, and we need to execute the plan. Wow, I love it how you do the job for me. I mean, you have created this exceptional transition for our next panelist. Thank you very much.
Morocco is shooting for the stars and for the moon, and we have big ambitions. So I'm privileged to have with me Talal Qaisi, and I would like to thank you very much for accepting our invitation and to be with us today. You're the vice president of this amazing and emblematic company, Group 42. You are the sponsor of the Expo. You are one of the most renowned technological company here in the EAU, and you are the vice president of the strategic projects and the space program. So my question is very simple because we've seen the journey that you had at Group 42. In your opinion, can we duplicate the Group 42 initiative in Morocco? And do you see areas of potential cooperation with the kingdom?
Thank you, Abdelmalik. It's really an honor and a privilege to be here amongst all of you. I am really excited to share the experience we've had and, more importantly, the lessons learned and perhaps support. I had a very good meeting with Her Excellency the Minister this morning and conveyed our confidence in Morocco already being further ahead of where we were when we started. And to me, supporting from that point is a lot easier than the ground floor. And it is really a testament to the vision that your leadership has had in trying to ensure that the digital infrastructure is in place to create something, if not like G42, hopefully better than G42 for Morocco, because these things have to be tailor-suited for the specific needs in the kingdom. Now, for my role specifically as it relates to, on a group level, understanding better how to capitalize on the digital infrastructure we have to support the different industry verticals we operate in. It's
the first layer Philippe Wang was talking about.
Yes.
You need it.
You need it. It's absolutely essential.
It's what you don't see in the iceberg, but you need it.
100%. To me, that's the most important thing that sometimes is taken for granted. And getting it right is not a matter of just buying hardware and setting up that foundation. Because...
Why? I thought it was a commodity. You just buy hardware, no?
I would have thought so too. The problem is when you go into practice, you start to understand that everything from the regulatory framework, first of all, it starts with the vision. And the good thing is Morocco has the vision. Morocco has the visionary leadership. Morocco has the people in the most important parts of government to champion this, including Her Excellency. To champion the need for digital transformation as a mechanism to become a forcing function of revenue generation for the government, but also, more importantly, ensuring the data sovereignty element that's crucial to being able to then monetize that data and then continue to confide the sensitive aspects of that data in industries like healthcare and financial and other areas. So the technology becomes a medium to that end goal. And there is a path towards that if you architect it from the beginning in a way that's conducive to ensuring that data sovereignty. And that's where we, as an implementer at a private company in G42, came in to implement that type of a strategy in building digital infrastructure that was part of the vision the leadership had in creating a regulatory environment that made it essential for there to be a layer of data sovereignty in the country. Now, when it comes to the different industry verticals, every single one can benefit from having that foundational layer of everything from the connectivity side to the data center side to the cloud and services side when it comes to AI being served on that digital infrastructure. And in our case, we started with a fundamental AI research institute that's now more morphed into a kind of applied AI research institute that's now being generating value for the different industry verticals, from oil and gas, where we do computer vision-based borehole analysis to help save billions of dollars, and armies of geologists looking at the data from seismic data and making decisions of where to drill, to our population genomics program on the healthcare side, where we're mapping the genome of 1.2 million Emirati nationals, to doing whole genome sequencing to help with predictive, preventative care and
prevent cancers and prevent diseases.
So to drug discovery that could lead to that based on genomics, and when you combine the genotype and phenotype, since we also can fuse EHR data to that, all the way to space, which I came in to handle. I came in from the UAE Space Agency.
We'll come back to space in this, because I think there are some really amazing stuff between Morocco and the EAU that can be done. But basically what you're telling us, Talal, is before you wear the tight outfit, show your muscle, you need to hit the gym.
100%.
That's what we need to do. We need to build the foundations about this. That's great. We've been talking about technology, new model of development, but there is something, of course, unique about Morocco. Morocco is not a country, it's a nation. So we'll talk about culture. Et à quel point la culture est quelque chose d'important.
And it's important to see how culture is important in Morocco. And I will start before raising a question. I will speak of this anecdote. In 1999, the person is called by Tony Blair, and the mission is quite simple. Sir Terence, every year we give 400 million pounds to the British Museum, and I would like to reduce that budget to 300 million because I need to save some money and I cannot support giving this money. And Sir Terence Conrad, who's owner of the Conrad shop, went to the British Museum and realizes that the state of the museum requires rehabilitation. So he prepares a long presentation, speaks of his travel, of how he came down to this Downing Street, and he goes to see the Prime Minister and he says, you asked me to reduce the budget from 400 million to 300 million, but I'm asking 600 billion. And he asks, why, Sir Terence, are you asking so much money? And he says, this is what civilized nations do. They finance culture. And we are a nation that finances culture. And when I was preparing this conference, we were speaking, my dear Mehdi Kotbi, we were speaking together, and we spoke about your incredible journey. I did not want to ask you the questions that were scheduled, but I realized that your foundation just created its 10th anniversary. But very bluntly, knowing that your talent, I would like you to enumerate the 10 reasons why Morocco is investing in culture. Please, how would you respond to that? Hi, thank you. And thank you for giving culture the place it deserves in a debate like this one. Culture is life. Imagine yourself in a period that is so complicated. We are closed on each other. We doubt. We are locked up in a shell. What is left? Culture, of course. And thank goodness for culture. And thank goodness for colors and for light and for music. And thank God for life. In Morocco, and you have stated it very beautifully, His Majesty made the choice to give culture the place it deserves in a civilized society, in a modern society, in an ambitious society. Just like that, I can't give you 10 reasons without giving you my own experience. I lived in France 37 years, and after 37 years, I decided to go back to Morocco, and I was thrilled to see this country move forward the way it's moving forward today, this extraordinary country where highways from Tanger to Agadir and Agadir to... Let me build you a circuit that is completely illogical. From Agadir to Abjar, going to Fez, extraordinary. And I'm like thinking, how lucky is the kingdom to have such a king, a visionary king, and who has developed the country the way it has. And so culture, you have asked me just now, culture. It is logical. It goes without saying. It holds a place that is well deserved. And you have asked me, today, Morocco is an example in so many sectors and in culture in particular, because during this pandemic, Morocco left its museums opened and gave the opportunity to people see the light coming through its windows. It is important. In Europe, everything was shut down. Yet we have respected fully all the social distancing rules that were put in place. If you'll allow me just a few words related to museums, it goes without saying that today we are extremely proud, but also proud to have such an experience. And this experience, ladies and gentlemen, we do not keep it to ourselves. We are going to share it with our African brothers, and this is important. It is knowledge that we share. It is a knowing how to be and how to do that we are sharing. We have opened a museum in Tanger. We are opening another musical museum in Meknes. We are going to open one of the most extraordinary museums in the world, and I'm not shaming away from the words. We are opening the Islamic Art Museum, and in a year and a half, we are opening a museum relating to the memories of Judaism. Can you imagine? 2 years ago, His Majesty gave the go-ahead to renovate the Palace Nthab for the Museum of Islamic Art and the start of the works for the Jewish memory in Morocco. I mean, if that is not a message of peace that has been sent from Fez, I could go on and on and on and tell you. But Mr. Mehdi Koudbi, we will come back to you. You are the Luke Skywalker of culture, the one that brings the light when the forces of darkness take over. No, 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 no. I just open the doors. The light comes in alone. The light already exists. But for all the actions that have been taken in that direction, please, you deserve a round of applause. You have definitely contributed to the brightness and the shining of culture. Mehdi Koudbi, we're going to French.
Development and needs means sometimes. And you are this prominent figure. We're so happy that you are with us and you immediately accepted when we reached out. This prominent figure in Africa when it comes to development, inclusion, social impact. You worked for Oxfam for 6 years, I believe, for the Rockefeller Foundation, and you currently serve, so you joined the big capital now. You currently serve as Vice President, Inclusive Growth, Global Social Impact at Visa. As you know, electronic payments and their development have been at the center of the conversation about digital economy and trade. To support the growth of digital economy and commerce. How do you evaluate Morocco's journey so far in this field?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm very grateful. We, Visa, are very grateful to have the opportunity to be part of this conversation. We would say that when you look at banking rates, PCA penetration, payment volumes over total payments. When you look at contactless penetration, you can say that actually in Morocco, and you look at many other indicators, you can say that there is a steady and sustained digitization actually in Morocco. But I would say that the pandemic has also been a catalyst of that. We have seen globally in this sector, from where we sit, we have seen 3 years worth of digitization happen in just 1 year. And Morocco has not been left out. A few indicators say that. Moroccan consumers and enterprises actually have really increased their savviness about digital payments. We've conducted the Stay Secure survey that we do with HPS for 2021. And according to that survey, 1 in every 5 consumers actually report that they would no longer shop at a merchant that does not offer digital payment. When you look at e-commerce, also, 24% of the surveyed actually are saying that they would drop a purchase of a product if they experience slowness or failed authentication, for instance. And also, we have seen, according to the survey again...
So Moroccan consumers are like global consumers?
They are actually increasingly...
They want the stuff fast
they
to
want
be
the
delivered.
stuff
And they want to pay seamlessly.
Seamlessly, exactly. And also, this digitization, we have also observed the decline of the use of cash also in Morocco. As you know, during the pandemic...
I think these are sweet words to the fiscal administration that Madam Minister is leading. If we're leaning towards a cashless economy, that allows Ministry of Finance to get more taxes.
Well, actually, we see that trend that is there. For instance, if you look at, you know that e-commerce has really grown exponentially during the pandemic. But if you look at cash on delivery, for instance, that used to be said, we've seen during that period 86% decline in cash on delivery. At the same time, we have a 74% increase in payment, digital payment of those during delivery. So overall, there have been really an industry consolidated steps really toward that growing digitization. And this is not just Morocco, you can say really the region has been experiencing that, because we are seeing in our projections, that between 2021 and 2026, the overall digital payment sector will be growing at 15.4% KGR.
Okay.
So that tells that there is really a trend.
We will come back to it and to see how we can make it more human-centric, as Madam Minister said, and how it benefits directly the population. I was supposed to go back to you, Saïd Ladi, but I think I will use my joker as moderator because we have a good transition to come back to Philippe Wang. Philippe Wang, vous allez dévoiler en janvier votre plan stratégique pour le Maroc.
Philippe Wang, you will have a strategic plan, Moonstar. You have named it this way for 2 reasons. First of all, because you use the moon, which is a very important symbol for Morocco. It's a very important it is a way of protestation during the independence days. So this is why you used this symbol of the moon, and you also used it. You used the star symbol because it's also very important to Morocco. So tell us more about this plan. Let us know more details about it. What is your plan for the country, and how would it help Morocco in its effort? I would say, in a summary, the plan is to accompany the kingdom in its digitalization. Huawei said that we need a platform, a cloud platform, and in order to boost this, we need to boost the ecosystem. So we know how ambitious the Morocco is, and this is why we've named our plan. We've taken the word stars and moon to the plan to name our program. So I would like to launch this program and encourage startups that are being launched to take this adventure, to take the digital economy. We cannot make this by our own. We need to have the support of the kingdom, as well as the industrial partners, as well the banks, telecom, and even other industrial partners that we have to encourage startups that want to get launched and facilitate the access to markets, the access to technologies, the access to capitals. So here I would like to mention that when it comes to the investment, we want to accompany them to access to market, to have a favorable framework to create jobs in the digital economy sector. So we need all of this. So the main idea is there, and concretely, maybe next year we will see the discussion between partners happening, and we will start to give subventions to startups, especially in the fintech. And we will work with our partners in order to accompany them and give them grants and subsidize them. So we will start to see this next year. Yes, this is why I wanted to say it. This is just an idea. We just suggested that, and later on we will concretize this idea by working together. So I can see here in this room we have 20% of the GDP of Morocco. So later on we will play the role of a catalyzer. All of this,
the core of the conversation, the commentator that I am is looking at the new challenges when it comes to decarbonation of the economy. A lot of people are talking about this new carbon tax that we will have in Europe in 2026. But I had an amazing conversation with you when we were preparing this conference, Saïd Lahadi, and you told me these are not challenges, these are opportunities. These are major opportunities for Morocco. So you spoke earlier about the energy mix, the strength of Morocco is deploying to become a green powerhouse. What can you tell us about those future challenges, opportunities?
Yeah, huge opportunities indeed. But the challenge is to implement them right. And I do trust the capabilities of implementing such visions properly in Morocco, as we just said earlier in this conference. Well, first big challenge is to provide massive quantities of green electricity for the domestic use. We don't have oil, as you know. We don't have coal. We have very limited quantities of gas. So we have more than anyone else, and we have very good, powerful resources in green energy. So we need to make sure that for the long term, in 20 years, 80 or 90% of electricity used in Morocco, consumed in Morocco, is green. And that is very, very important in terms of competitiveness, in terms of cost of energy, as well as in terms of carbon footprint. As you know, the game has already started. The carbon border adjustment mechanisms are being implemented in Europe, probably in other regions of the world. We have to be prepared for that. And we have to take that opportunity.
But is there a clear and present danger for Moroccan exportations to Europe?
I don't believe there is a danger because we have this attribute of being able to produce green electricity and having this green electricity directly purchased by industrial operators from where it is produced. So I don't believe there is a danger. We have to be very cautious and we have to implement that properly, but I don't think there is a danger. But there is an opportunity because, as I said earlier, we built up a huge industrial cluster based on the attributes of geography, of human capital. Now we have this also attribute of green energy that will be more powerful than ever in the global trade. Now there is a second challenge. The second challenge is that now we see that Europe, for example, is setting a target of being completely decarbonized by 2050. That is very strong. It's very strong. And that means that at some stage Europe will be importing green energy with massive quantities. This green energy may be imported as
so we may not export only cars, we may export energy in the coming years.
That's the point. Okay. I mean, we have the opportunity of being a regional player in exporting green energy. It will be done probably by through chemical commodities like ammonia or green methanol. That's what we call the green hydrogen
These are transition for the transition stage.
I think it will be there for the long term. Green energy will be traded in the world through chemical commodities like the ones I mentioned, and there is a huge opportunity for Morocco to be a player in, not exporting only industrialized goods, but also exporting green energy. This is already starting. It's just starting. It's for the 2030 plus, but it is already starting, and I believe we can have a very important role at this regard. We have already a national roadmap for hydrogen. We have international developers that are looking into real projects, and I hope this will happen starting from the next few years.
Okay, so thank you very much, Said. That has been very clear. But for all of this, we need money. So I turn to you, the regulatory body. There is this hot topic everybody is talking about, which is green finance. How do you ensure that this essential matter is kept on check? And how do you see the future of green finance in Morocco and Zahayat?
Well, usually when we talk, and that was when we talk about think about financing, the first thought we have is banks, and that was my first main challenge, to raise awareness that capital markets could also finance projects in investments. Our journey with sustainable finance started a few months after I arrived, with the COP22 held in Marrakesh, and I really wanted to do something to explain that capital markets had a role could play a role. I understood it was the COP for finance and the COP of Africa. So this is how we started by, and at that time, just let me tell you that capital markets authorities and our international association was not helpful, because their idea is that green instrument, green bonds were one more asset class, and they had to stay neutral at the time, and they didn't want to encourage this kind of product. So we were quite lonely when we started, and we, with the IFC, we released the first green guidelines, and that has been our approach for regulator, because we understand that we have to be innovation driven. And when I listen to all these panelists, I think although we are innovation-driven, we should do more, much more. So the challenge of green finance started with this commitment, not only from capital markets, the capital market stakeholders, but the whole financial system in COP22 to finance the sustainable development. So we started to make it easy. What we do is that we write guidelines using the best benchmarks, international standards, and we explained that to the issuers and to the investors, and this is how it was a sustainable project. Mazen was the first to launch during COP22 its green bonds, thanks to these the guidelines that
$200 million, that was the first bond that he...
That was the first, and it was the launch, and this is what we're doing to keep, and more other sustainable, even gender. Today, bonds have been launched with the same approach, and little by little, we put mandatory rules, especially tackling information to explain what is green, what is sustainable, and how it can be kept in the regulatory body.
So you're committed to do that?
Yes, we're committed. I just wanted to say that we're not only nationally committed, but we are also committed on the side of the continent. We launched also in COP22 Marrakesh Pledge, which has been signed by many African stock exchanges and regulators. Over 30 markets are committed, and we have shared our experiences with many of them, and some countries did launch, thanks to our guidelines, launch green sovereign bonds, and I'm looking at the Minister of Finance saying that we haven't launched any yet, sovereign green bonds, although we were the very first to...
I think a lot of people were asking the Minister of Finance a lot of things today. I think she still has a lot on her list. But thank you, Neza. We've been talking about opportunities, green mix, money. Let's talk with you about talents, because that's an amazing question for Morocco. 1 out of every 50% of our engineers emigrate from Morocco because we haven't had yet the right match. What can you tell us about your experience about talent retention? And that's interesting for us because you're a very prominent figure and senior figure. You're an Arab, you understand technology. How can we retain talents in our countries to be sure that they will work in the technology field?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's one we struggled with a lot. When I say we, I'm putting on my former...
So we are not alone struggling with
No, not
this.
at all, not at all. In fact, I think it's more profound in our part of the world that we are subject to this brain drain that ends up going to places where there are more opportunities to exercise the type of ambitions and aspirations they have when it comes to academia, especially when it comes to STEM education. And so we suffered from this, and I can relate to my stint of time supporting the space program, because it was only established here in 2014 as an agency. There were some nascent efforts before that, but there were 3 main reasons why I think the UAE embarked on a space program. The first is obviously to further diversify the economy away from hydrocarbons. It was a natural next step, and tremendous ancillary benefits come out of a space program. You look at the Apollo missions from the US and many technologies that we take for granted today that came as a direct result of the investment in space. Baby formula, insoles for shoes, things, Velcro, things that you won't even, that are counterintuitive to the technology spillover effects that you had with MRIs, X-rays, etc. The second was contribution to knowledge and humanity at large. That was, a given when it came to the science that we would perform with space. And the third, to your point, is inspiration of the youth and enabling them to derive a sense of purpose. And again, to the point I think Thea made in her remarks, there's sometimes a lack of a proper or a strong narrative from here in this part of the world that emanates because of some of the experiences we've had in the past. And if you go to the underlying root cause of this, it's really the lack of opportunities for youth and the ability for them to derive a sense of purpose. And so our HOPE mission, which was relevantly named HOPE to Mars, was an attempt to inspire youth across the region to see that there would be an outlet to their ambitions in pursuing STEM education and to ensure that we regain some of the brain drain that took place. Now, when it comes to what we are doing today as an AI company and how we're trying to support and export that model as well to many different countries, where we can have them embrace and learn from the experiences and the mistakes that we made. The only downside I see is that talented Moroccans that we have working for us today will probably want to go back to Morocco. And trust me, we have a lot of talented Moroccans that work for us, but that would be a great problem to have.
So, thank you very much, Talal. Vous avez dit deux choses qui sont très importantes.
Thank you, Talal. You mentioned a lot of interesting points. How to be able to retain talent. In less than 10 years, you were able to succeed to prove that you can reverse. You were able to recruit a lot of sculptors, a lot of artists, Giacometti, Picasso, for example. This is a very important sign that indicates that Morocco is decomplexed and can have the most emblematic artists during the past years. How did you manage to do that? First of all, I would like to salute people whom we don't mention a lot. The security of the country is ensured. The Musée du Louvre, the Center of Pompidou, and other museums in the world, whether it's Spanish that we have granted at Goya, for instance, and others have lended at pieces of art while security was not there. So let's talk first about security and salute people who help us to maintain security. Now our country is secure, and it's something very important to mention. The museum answers to norms, the relations we have in Morocco and the relations of Morocco with other countries led to the trust of our foundation in our country. They don't trust an institution, they don't trust a person, they trust the Morocco, they trust the country, the whole country. Let's salute also exceptional people, the administration, and in particular, I would like to seize the opportunity of the presence of Ms. Fatah to salute all this administration of finance that accompanied us and that still accompany us in order to have an exchange and democratize and lead, makes accessible Goya, Van Gogh, Miro, and I can name a lot of great names today. It's the first country in the Arab world, Morocco, the first country in the continent, African Levant, that had received this many artists, and I'm so proud of it. I'm proud of this Morocco of today. So maybe could be this is one of the changes of paradigms that we are having. This is something that is happening in this particular country, Morocco. So to wrap it up with you.
Inclusivity, global growth, but you retain a fee, right? When someone makes a payment with a credit card. So you've been advocating for inclusive growth and social impact. That's precisely your title as Vice President of Visa. But what does it really mean for the future of emerging countries like Morocco? How can we move faster and look further?
Okay, I would say that digital payment, access to digital payment is really a game changer. Why? because it very simply allows to connect anyone, anywhere, with the global digital economy. By 2020, we had pledged to digitally enable 500 million people, which we have achieved before 2020. But we continue to make that our goal, working with our partners and clients, and enabling them with new, actually, technology. And technology that is affordable, easy to access, and easy to use, like tap to phone, or click to pay, or QR codes, etc. But also being conscious that the backbone of the economy is micro and small businesses, many of whom are actually in the informal sector and not having access to formal finance. We see digitization as a way to do that. This is why last year, Visa committed to work with its partners to digitize 50 million SMBs, small and micro businesses across the world, by 2023. Just as of last year, we have already enabled 16 million towards that goal of 50 million. But what I want, and this includes also really facilitating the enablement of these micro and small businesses. For instance, we have brought what we call the rapid merchant onboarding, which really allows actually the acquisition and digitization of these SMBs by allowing them to directly onboard with the acquirer in just 7 days.
You're talking about people in the handicraft business who are remote, guys that here Tariq Sadiq is trying to encourage to sell rugs, to sell. You want to make them global players.
Exactly, because that's what allows them actually to be able to even access cross-border trade and all of that. The other thing also I think that is very important to your question is what we have seen during the pandemic is that the SMBs that were digitized actually were the ones that were able to withstand actually the crisis. Some of them even...
That's part of their resilience.
Yes, it enabled them to be resilient. So what is very important about that is the access, but also having employees and personnel that have digital skills. So providing access to those skills is extremely important. This is why also we are putting as a value-added service to our clients and partners several free training materials that allow to address that, both for micro and small businesses. For instance, Practical Business Skills is a free online material that we offer to our clients and partners that they can support their clients with and help them actually make more informed decisions about how to manage and how to grow their businesses, improve actually their income and their livelihoods. When you come to the increased digitization, it is also very important to enhance the financial literacy skills of the consumers or the individuals that have been previously actually underserved or excluded, so that access to digital is not something that burns them out because of lack of that literacy. So those two actually are the same, are two sides of the same coin. So it is very important to support, bring new innovative technology that enable them seamlessly, affordably, but also enhance their capabilities.
Thank you very much, Mamadou Biteye, because it's great to finish with the SMBs and those small companies that are so important at a time where work has been challenged so much. Thank you to all of you. I will ask you to remain seated. And there is a fourth major change that we didn't talk about in Morocco, is that we became eco-friendly and frugal, and we ended the panel with the 15 minutes ahead of it. So we know how to keep it short as well. I will just ask now for, as you know, we've had thinkers, we've had doers, we've had public servants, but it's important sometimes to call the commentators to do the final wrap-up. So I will ask my colleague and friend Jamila Gandhi to join us. She has been taking notes. I saw her during this whole panel. And because in Morocco we would like to be kept on check, she will have the final words and do the wrap-up for this conference and take my place before we can release all of you to have lunch. No. So, Jamila, can you come? You have a huge responsibility because those panelists were amazing today. Can you provide her with a mic? Sit. So Jamila Gandhi is a senior reporter from Forbes. She has been watching Morocco very closely today, and we have this immense honor of having her with us, and she comes from Asia, so that's good because we have this view that is coming from the West as well, and that was maybe underrepresented today. Take us home, Jamila. Your turn.
Thank you so much, Abdul Malik. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As he mentioned, my name is Jamila. I'm a senior reporter at Forbes Middle East. I'm delighted to be here with all of you today. Happy National Day. So yes, in today's discussion as a summary, I would like to begin with saying that we heard our esteemed witnesses on how Morocco is preserving a balance as well as how the kingdom is embracing the future. So we've learned that Morocco is in motion. There is a vision, and our Minister of Economy and Finance rightly pointed to the central subjects for the development of the country for both the short and long-term combinations. A few major remarkable milestones that stood out for me that I'd like to personally share were Morocco achieved 70% of a vaccination rate, as well as the kingdom hit almost 6% growth in 2021. These figures show that the country's potential and continuing use of resources, investment, and human capital are all supported by His Majesty's roadmap. We also heard that the panelists talk of significance and the vision of the new development model. This is underpinned by the globalization of social protection, digitalization as a response to the crisis and catalyst for post-crisis transformation, and a shock of simplification and modernization of the state. The health crisis has also opened up new opportunities for the banking sector particularly. We learned that balance is crucial for harmony. This is also true for preserving rights from education to retirement for the rural communities as well as the agricultural sector, as pointed out before. The significance of efficiency was also stressed. Sustainable development, initiatives to champion inclusivity across Morocco, and the newly coined trickle-up effect, as we all learned today. From an entrepreneurship standpoint, we recognize the need for more representation for women in the public sector, as well as the investments for startups that are duly needed. While these areas need addressing, I do also want to highlight some of the positive data points. The World Bank, in its 2020 annual report on economic development in the kingdom's response to the brutality of the pandemic, was featured as both proportionate and appropriate. We've also heard again and again from our esteemed witnesses how the pandemic has emphasized the role of technology and digital transformation and how it continues to bring opportunities, one of the key central themes of Expo 2020.
Jamila, at this point I have a request.
Yes.
Just write down this and release your article. I think it's fine for all of us here because you got all the key insights from the first panel.
I got it all. And one more thing that really interested me as well on a side note from today's panel was how on the global doing business ranking, Morocco ranked 53rd place in 2020. Just for context, this is 75 place gain from the year before in 2019. This was all through the sustained efforts and investments in infrastructure and education, led by the example of the private sector. Again, for context, Morocco stands third in the MENA region as well as in Africa. This is ahead of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Oman, and Qatar as well. Against the innovation-driven green plan that we all heard of today, the panelists' agenda for green financing, the cultural landscape, and sustainable investments was also touched on, alongside mandatory legislations. I think for all of us, Morocco's task ahead is clear. to identify the ways and means to make Moroccan growth more inclusive, higher, and sustainable. And the transformation is in motion, as we've all heard today repeatedly. The kingdom has an exemplary leadership, and the country's decades of reform and human development are a testament to this vision, a testament that is inspiring. So I hope today, with me, you all leave inspired for Moroccan's future as much as I am. Thank you.
Thank you very much.